Coaches Convo. We're happy to have you here. We're just going to bounce some ideas off each other and kind of challenge each other professionally and see where the conversation goes. My name's TK Kiernan from Sacred Heart University. We're in the Northeast Conference, and we're located in Fairfield, Connecticut.
I'm Giuseppe Papaccio. I coach at NJIT. We're in the ASUN Conference in Newark, New Jersey.
It's going Chris Collazo, Monmouth University in the MAC Conference, and we're in West Long Branch, New Jersey.
Hi, how's it going, everyone? George Brown from St. John's University. We compete in the Big East Conference, and we're located in Queens, New York.
Awesome. So we got a bunch of different coaches today, and we're going to see, kind of where this takes us. But I want to start by asking how culture gets developed, maybe not in your program necessarily today, but what you've seen over your tenure in baseball and your lifetime in baseball, and what activities have proven to work, and what you kind of have tried and gotten away from it and the reasons why. And I'll start by just saying last year we did something at Sacred Heart where we took the guys to an escape room. It was really cool. There was 4 different rooms, and we could divvy up the guys into whatever combination we wanted. So we had some freshmen with some seniors, sophomores with some seniors, and kind of made sure that they were all interacting and challenging each other. And this was, I thought it was great because we got away from the baseball field, and they were able to kind of expand and explore a little bit more with their minds and be creative in a setting that calls for being right or wrong. So they still had to deal with a little bit of rejection. If they were recommending something that wasn't what needed to happen, how are the older guys reacting? How are the younger guys reacting to some criticism? And I thought that was something that kind of opened up the lines of communication a little bit more than usual. Along with that, we do a couple things physically with strength and conditioning, which gets the point across. But, I think that's pretty universal in a culture being built in the weight room. But what are some of the other things that you guys have been able to take advantage of in your time in baseball to help build a culture and really a family within your teams?
I'll go next. I think there's other things. You talk about off the field. I think off the field stuff is very, very important because not everything we do is solely baseball. So one thing we've done in the past is we split our team up into different teams. So it could be 2 teams, 3 teams, 4 teams, whatever it is, and they can get points based on different things. So at the end of the semester, GPA, over 3.0, you get points. If your lockers meet standards, you get a point on locker checks. If you go to a different sports game, so if you go to a field hockey game, you go to a women's soccer game, a men's soccer game, a football game, a basketball game, you get points for supporting other teams. Things like that. And then at the end of the semester, you can tally up the points. And then you give, extra gear, extra prizes, whatever it is. But when guys aren't pulling their weight with that, you can see the guys that are pulling their weight, address it within themselves, non-coach directed, and it's player directed. So I think the big thing is getting the guys to become player directed instead of coach directed. And that's when culture gets built pretty well. We've found
that's what I'll agree with the most, that I think anything that you do, it can't just be at the direction of coaches. I mean, we've done escape rooms. We do call it an Omaha challenge or whatever you want to call it. But in the end, like, the only thing that matters is that they care and that they buy in. And if guys don't find value in it and they feel like it's just something that coaches are telling them to do on a Saturday morning, it doesn't matter. But if guys really despise losing and despise going into competition and not fulfilling what they need to do, that's when you see who really cares and who takes it by the horns. And those are the things that for us, we've really found value in, because if it's playing, we play knockout, we do opposite hand dodgeball, just different sports, and get them into a different athletic competition and find who just hates to lose and who is going to find a way and who's going to step up and kind of thump their chest and say, hey, follow me. And those are the things that you're trying to gain out of that, while building culture and finding a way to come together as a team.
Take your kids bowling if you want to see who's the most competitive kid on the team.
I completely agree. It seems like we're all on the same page with all that. We did some Omaha challenge type of stuff too, but it was kind of like a holistic view on it. Like, we tried to reward points for everything, for GPA, for anything that was like could be recorded, whether it be sprint times, whether it be lifting times. We did like a tug of war. We did like almost like a spin on like a basketball shot, hitting a ball off a tee, like jump roping, all stuff that was exactly what George was saying, was like competitive, win or lose, but it's not like baseball and just like lifting weights. It was kind of like, follow me, like I'll lead like this. And you see the guys who really want to win and who hate to lose. And I think that's exactly what you guys are saying. It's the same exact thing. It's like you're trying to create something where the players care on their own and they're creating like a culture by themselves without the coach having to be like, all right, guys, here's practice and this is what we're going to do today, and everybody better be bought in. It's like you make some fun out of it, and you kind of see the way I've seen like Omaha Challenge type of stuff like that take off is we kind of create the structure, and then like you kind of stand in the background and everybody else does all the work. It's like it's probably like the most fun part of the fall for us, is because we get to watch the guys compete. Other stuff that I think is important just from culture building that's a little bit away from the field is like trying to get as many guys to go and support other teams on campus as well. Going to basketball games, going to soccer games. You can see who the guys that are serious about it and have some school spirit. We try and think about like different ways to grade like GPA. So guys take winning and losing in the classroom really serious too. And I think that's something that's helped us. But it seems like all four of us are kind of on the same page in what we do. We try and blend a little bit of competition, but with outside baseball stuff too.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. It sounds like we're all on the same page. And as far as it meaning a whole lot more than just being on the field and how we're attacking every aspect of our daily lives. I think that's a big part of the culture. Is it can't just be the 4 hours that we get you when you're preparing for practice and at practice. You know, it's getting to sleep on time, making sure that you're waking up for that 8 a.m. class. All those things are going to pay dividends as far as building the team culture, especially when you're going up against another team who's trying to do the same thing that you are. So that's great. I know, G, you got something that you want to ask the guys. So
yeah, I was just thinking from obviously a lot of us now in the situation that we're all in across the country, across the world, we have a lot more time to kind of reflect. And I was thinking, all right, as a coach, we're doing this, and as a player, you should be doing this too. And it's kind of like, what separates really good players from maybe the mediocre players or the players that were good but never really panned out. And it's the players that I've been around that I've either coached, played with, or just have seen are guys that seek truth. Like, I think of a truth seeker as somebody that's like, all right, what am I really not good at? What do I need to get better at? And how do I do that? It's some guys, and I was guilty of it as a player, and I've seen players do it. I'm sure you guys have all done it too. There are a couple things that you're really good at, and you like to stick to them. I always think of like, all right, you get in the cage and you like to hit tee and you like to hit front toss because you're good at it. But like, how many of you are putting the velo machine on? How many of you are hitting like a random breaking ball? How many of you are doing this and doing that? And I think that's a separator that a lot of guys, not only the situation that we're in right now, but it's just overall in general, whether you be a coach, a businessman, a student, anything, whether you're being recruited, it's kind of like the separator, I think, is the people who can separate themselves and seek truth. It's like, can I be mature enough and strong enough to really dissect what needs to be better in my game, whether it be in school, in the classroom, in the recruiting process, in my job? And then can I like develop a plan on my own in my room by myself without a coach or without anybody talking to me or guiding me, develop a plan that I can act on. So I'm thinking in the broad view of what we're looking at now, guys might have like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It might be the whole summer. And you can be, when you get back on the field or get back, I don't know, in the classroom, you can be a completely different player if you dissect it like that. And I think that's just a separator when you're looking at players that might be like quote unquote overachievers, that you recruited them when they were in high school, pretty good player, maybe a walk-on kid. And then he comes and he just works, makes people better. And he like goes the extra mile. Maybe it's on his own or with you guys. And he turns out to be the all-conference, all-American draft pick, whatever it is. And then there are the players that are like, oh my God, best looking kid at the showcase, runs, hits, throws, really smart. And then he gets on campus and you might think that what he got in there is going to keep him there. And then it kind of fizzles out. And you're always at the beginning of every year, you're like, when is this kid? This is this kid's year. This is his year. This is his year. but maybe it could be something as simple as he never went to the drawing board, sitting down by himself and was like, what are the next steps? What do I really need to do here? And I think just with what we're looking at now, it's a really great time because we're doing it. Zoe, you said it too. We're doing it as coaches. Like, how can I get better right now? It's like, let me sit down for a minute and like, what can I create for our guys? Or what can I do to be a little bit better? And I think just for high school athletes too, it's huge. Say you're a big power hitting lefty, and you're like, all right, I can get recruited because I could swing the bat. That might be bad body, might not have a position, really low GPA, haven't taken the SAT, but I'm gonna like hit my way to a scholarship. I think if you sit there and talk about it out loud with yourself, you're kind of being unrealistic. And I think the separator between kids that kid might go and in the next month or so create himself a better opportunity than if he sits and he's like, I'm going to hit my way to a scholarship. I think the truth lies in what you're actually thinking about. I think the truth will reveal itself when you just dissect yourself a little bit more. And I know that's a big rant, but I think that's something that can be applicable to everybody. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on that.
I think one of the biggest things when you're talking about that people fall short, and I think we all fall short, because I think as coaches, one of the things that we'll do the most is talk about all the things that's wrong with these kids, and we don't do the same thing at times. And this is a perfect time for all of us to sit here, self-evaluate. But I think that's where it starts with everybody, is if you're not an honest self-evaluator, you are doing yourself a disservice. Because if you can't look at yourself and say, these are the things I do well, and I don't care about the other stuff, or I do everything well, I'm fine, you're just not looking in the mirror and doing the right things for yourself. I think when you're going through the recruiting process, you have a very unique opportunity going to college, because you can pick the person who's going to develop you. So you can talk to somebody who says, hey, you don't do this, this, and this well. This is how I'm going to get you better. If you can't hear that and hear me tell you, hey, your changeup is useless, it's a cross-off pitch, you're probably not going to succeed very much playing for me, so you shouldn't come to my school. And you have to be able to hear that evaluation from someone else, but self-evaluate and be honest. I think the devil's advocate argument is you have to look at the other side as well, because when you're picking that program, if you go to a coach who, when you talk about your swing, he doesn't believe in the way that you swing the bat, and you really do, you probably shouldn't go there. Because when you get to college, the other side of it is you need to dance with the one that brought you. I mean, I was a 6'1" left-handed pitcher with a good changeup and no breaking ball. I have to be that in order to be successful, because if I just think I'm going to go to college and completely become a power lefty with a good break, it's not going to happen. So you have to go with both sides of it and evaluate what you are and hone the things that you're good at, but develop the things that you aren't. And I think that's a huge issue with kids, because they want to stay in their comfort zone. Hey, if I'm a good lower body guy, I like to squat. That's it. Well, being strong in your lower body is a positive. So use that as well. But you also have to be able to do the other things that you maybe you're a little bit overweight and you don't like running, and maybe we need to do a little bit more of that. So but you have to look in the mirror and be able to assess yourself. So.
Yeah. I think, being able to kind of remove yourself from where you're at in your playing career and your life in general, and being able to self-reflect and self-assess is probably the most important thing that you can do at this time. And it's the most important thing that you can learn how to do throughout growing up, whether you're in high school or you're a freshman or sophomore in college, and you're like, the coach doesn't understand me. He's trying to tell me to do this. Why is he telling me to do this? I'm just going to do it my way. I think that's how you see kids that come in that might not have a role necessarily their freshman, sophomore year develop into key contributors their junior and senior year. They're learning, they're growing up, they're maturing, and they're realizing that if they can self-assess and self-correct and get themselves on maybe a different track that they didn't see for themselves initially, they can find ways to get on the field and contribute. It's something that you can always be working on and pushing your willingness to try new things. And if you're not willing to do that, a lot of the things that you'll be asked in college are things that you haven't been asked before. You're you're the 3-hole hitter on your high school team, you get a scholarship, and we're asking you to bunt for the first 25 games. Like, we want to get something positive going on for you. And although in the fall practice when we're working on bunting, you don't understand it, like, that's what we're going to ask you to do, because that's part of the process. You need to become well-rounded, and if you can't see it within yourselves, it's going to be really hard for coaches to get it out of you. And this time that we have away from the game is the time to do that, and at least try to read something or do something different that might make you a little uncomfortable at first, but maybe it makes you better in the long run.
Yeah, no doubt. And, you talk about seeking the truth. I think there's no better feeling as a coach than when a kid can take those training wheels off and just progresses and goes off on his own, and he's going to be all right. It's the kid that has to have his training wheels on for 3 years, and you said it, G, like, this is going to be his year, this is going to be his year, and it like never really comes to what it could be, because the kid probably didn't seek the truth on what he actually needed to become or what he actually is, right? Kind of like what George said, what he actually is. But with seeking the truth also, and I'll get into kind of what I was going to talk about. I think everyone can seek the truth. They can be better mentally. Everyone, whether it's in baseball, it's in everyday life, it's in everything they do. So basically, I wrote some things down. The act of thinking is talking to ourselves, right? So how can we talk to ourselves more productively and in a positive fashion to help us relax and perform better, right? So that's something we want our kids to have, that skill to help themselves out. So the main point of everything is to eliminate the word don't from your vocabulary. So you need to start off with telling yourself what you want to do rather than what you don't want to do. So if we take don't out, we'll be much more relaxed and much better. So examples, I wrote them down here. When we were all kids, it was what? Don't touch the hot stove. Don't put your hands on the windows. And what happens? You touch the window, you touch the stove. George has a burn. All right. Let's use golf. Georgie, you're 110 yards out. What club you using?
I'm pretty powerful, man. Probably a half swing sand wedge.
Half swing sand wedge. All right. And then let's pretend like there's a pond right in front of the green.
Don't hit it in the water, man.
Don't hit it in the pond, right? You come over the ball, you're super positive, and right before you swing, you say, don't hit it in the pond. And what happens every single time?
I usually just slice it out to the left anyways, but yeah, if I do hit it square, I'm probably hitting it into the pond. Right
into the pond, because you thought, don't hit it into the pond, right? So kind of the less positive language is heard in your head, the likelihood is you can't coach yourself into being productive. So like a hitter, I don't want to chase a slider down here. Don't swing at a high pitch as I'm stepping into the box. What's going to happen is that's exactly what you're going to do. So our players, we try to teach them to kind of change their language in their head to go, all right, instead of don't swing at a slider down, say in their head, I'm going to look for a fastball in my middle 11 inches here. I'm going to do this. So I'm going to focus on what I want to do to be successful rather than what I don't want to do to fail. And the success rate goes way up. For a pitcher, George, it's like, all right, I don't want to miss with my fastball in here, right?
That's the one that everyone says in Little League. Don't walk the 9-hitter.
Don't walk him.
About is walking him.
Don't walk him, right? All right, I'm coming set. I'm breathing. I don't want to miss my fastball here. All right, what happens? Miss, right? How about I'm going to dot my fastball up on the outside part. Mm-hmm. Execute. So It's just kind of the brain only recognizes kind of the function of what you're talking about rather than like the words around it. So basically my whole thing and spiel about this whole thing is kind of focus on what you want to do rather than what you don't want to do. And if you could take that thought process into everyday life and into your at-bats and how you practice and how you go to class and what you do in class, that will make you much more relaxed, much more positive, and you'll get much better results because of the way you're thinking mentally. I could talk for about an hour about that stuff, about more things, but I don't want to take up too much time here, obviously.
I'll jump in and kind of build off that. I think that's a part that is undercoached and undervalued. We have these practices where we're trying to buzz around for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and we might not think that it's as important to take that 12 to 15 minutes to talk about that or our breathing when we step in the box. And I think part of the language and why it's important is because when you say those things in your head, you see them happen. We want to, I guess, taking it further to visualize, like we want to visualize success and us doing what we want to do as opposed to what we don't want to do. So when you say don't and you say don't hit the ball in the water, in your head, there's a flash of you hitting the ball in the water. Like, hit the ball on the green. I golf too. I try to hit it up through a ring, and before I hit the ball, I envision that ring that the ball's got to go through in order to go where I want. And I think that, we work on it somewhat, and you see a lot of clips of these teams laying down on the field with their hats over their faces, talking through a visualization period, which is awesome. And it's part of the process if you make it part of the process. And if you want to see it pay dividends for you, you got to schedule that time in practice and work on it away from the field as well. If you're a young player that's growing up, like, take your 10 minutes in the morning and just kind of be zen and figure out, what this day holds, and relax and breathe and feel yourself in the moment.
Right. Like right now, because there's nothing to do, we have our hitters just doing mirror work, just standing in the mirror, no swings, just looking at themselves, closing their eyes, and kind of using that language in their head to picture, good contact out in front, and even with the pitchers too, about dotting their fastball up and not using the word don't in their everyday lives, and seeing the results of it.
I just got one thing to add and I think it's because I take it so personally when we talk mental game, because as a player, it was like the game changer for me. It was like 3 years of being pretty good, playing well, playing all the time. And then it was like, I always tried to like mix in mental game here and there in my life. And I just like completely committed to it one summer. And it was like, I think the player, we say it's like undercoached, with I agree with, but we try our best. I try my best to do it with our guys, but I think the players sometimes struggle with it because it's not sexy and you can't see it pay off immediately. Like some swing stuff or some velocity stuff, like you can kind of see it work right in front of you, but the guys that really stick with it, and then they have, like, I know for me, I had that aha moment where I felt it, and I felt like the stuff that I was visualizing and thinking about and goal setting and breathing, it like clicked for me one day, and I was committed to it, and I'm still committed to it. And I think the guys need to, it's so cliche across all sports, is like trust the process. But it's like once you start to trust the process, you just need that one little glimmer of hope, and you're like, wow, I practiced that and it's starting to work for me. It might be in a fall inter squad, or it might be the conference championship where you're like, you get in the box and you're completely under control. Your mind is right, your body is right, and it just clicks for you, and you have like the epitome of your mental game in your career comes down to like one at that, and you're like, I'm just sold. But I think for the high school player, the college player, maybe even the pro player, it's like you need to stick with it until you get that moment. It's like you can't do it. You can't do the breathing once and the self-talk once, and you're like, all right, where is it? I think that's where some guys get lost. Is like, where's the result? Where's the result? Where's the result? I'm sure you guys were all guilty. I was guilty too. I was like, how long am I going to be reading these books for until like I get a hit because of it?
Right. You said it best. It is 100% an aha moment. And in today's world, it's not a measurable stat. Yeah. It's not a measurable, you can't measure it because it's inside your own head. And that's where, you talk about like the truth seeking, and the guys who kind of make those jumps from when you recruit them to when they're done are the guys, and we can all say are the guys that figure it out mentally and can control themselves, not just in game, like in practice, throughout their daily lives. It's good. It's fun to see when guys do have that aha moment, because you can kind of tell as a coach, like, hey, that guy just had an aha moment.
I was just going to say that you say it's like intangible, I guess, and you can't really see it. You can't see it pay off. But as coaches, I'm sure you guys are all in the same boat. You can look down your roster and you can look at guys at practice, and you can just pick and choose the guys that are like, they have it right mentally. They're in the right mindset. And you can see it, whether it be, you can see like their heart rate elevating. You can see them breathing a little bit different. You kind of know. And those are the guys that you want to trust, but you can't really trust yet because they haven't gotten their mind right yet. And I think that's a great, like right now where we're at in I guess, society and in the baseball world, it's a great time to start if you haven't started, and there's a lot of time to actually practice it. So getting in the cage, hitting off the tee, and long tossing might not be the only thing guys can do right now to get a little bit better.
No doubt. And you know what's interesting about it? I think you guys have all kind of touched on before a play. And I think the progression of that is what happens after a play, because there's going to be times when bad stuff happens. It's inevitable, no matter what. If you're a pitcher, you're going to throw a ball. If you're a hitter, you're going to chase a slider. It's going to happen. And what do you say to yourself after it does? Because we constantly deal with, as coaches, guys who infiltrate their own mind with negative self-talk after bad things happen. Why am I throwing? You stink. Stop throwing balls. Well, no one's trying to walk anybody. No one's trying to chase sliders. Like, why reiterate that to yourself that you're doing it? There's no point of it. There's no positive that possibly comes of it. Now, I think this will segue into what I'm going to talk about a little bit, but I think you do have to have different forms of self-talk in different venues, because if you're in a training environment, you can talk to yourself a little bit differently than if you're in a competitive environment. Because if you're competing, I think it has to be all positive. You cannot dwell on anything negative. If you're in a training environment and you're trying to push yourself, maybe some negative self-talk about your failures or what you aren't and you want to be ends up being a motivator for you. So there are avenues to use negative self-talk, because it makes you look in the mirror a little bit and you say, like, man, like, you said you were going to work out yesterday and you didn't. Is today going to be the same thing? And you challenge yourself. So it ends up being a different avenue to get to the same place. And what's really interesting is the ways that you can develop that with yourself and understand who you are. I'll use a specific example of a guy that we had was Kevin McGee, and I only shout him out because it's so funny the way that he developed his self-talk. By the end of his career, he was openly negative and sarcastic because it helped him do what he needed to do. If he spiked a changeup 56 feet, he would say that you could hear from the dugout, "Good pitch, Kev. That was really awesome. That'll probably help." But it was his ability to say, "Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, clear it and it's over." So you do have to develop your own for yourself. Mine isn't yours, isn't his. And you have to figure out, hey, if I need to pump my own tires the whole time, and I need to be so aggressive telling myself how good I am, that's what I need to be. And in those different environments, you have to challenge yourself. So what I wanted to, and I was going to do it on generally injury, but I think it applies to everybody, especially in a venue like this, is the difference between a training environment and a competitive environment. Because I think we've gotten to a place in our society where guys seek that comfort, and similar to seeking truth, they seek being comfortable. In a training environment versus a competitive environment, you're often, even if you are competing in your training, it's very different than when you're on a field. So I think what a lot of guys have leaked towards is being more comfortable, pushing themselves and working. Because I can ask you guys, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but the weight training that exists nowadays, the off-field facilities, the resources that guys have now are miles better than anything that I had growing up. But somehow guys are worse at the game of baseball. They're better at skills, but they're worse at baseball. Because, and this isn't the fault of anybody, it's kind of the fault of everybody. Because we have singled out aspects of the competitive game and deemed them more important than other aspects. Well, in the end, like, what are you doing as a pitcher? Your job is to win a game and get 3 outs so your team can get back in the dugout and hit. Your object as a hitter is your team's supposed to score runs. And those things are highlighted in a competitive environment much more so than in a training environment. Now, I will say this as a disclaimer, because everybody's going to come in as a hot take at St. John's doesn't like Driveline all of a sudden because I said train. No, you have to be able to separate the two, because we've had guys go out there and it changes their mindset and it's awesome. But if you don't have the ability to translate that into getting 3 outs, it doesn't really matter. Your ability to throw harder or do what you need to do in a skill standpoint needs to translate into your ability to compete, in your ability to get a result that we're trying to get as a team. Now, we all have to be process oriented, but if our process doesn't bring us to the result that we want, we have to change our process. And that's where we have to self-assess and be honest with ourselves.
Agreed. And I think just to kind of add to that, I think what you were going to say too about the injury stuff would be super important to guys that might be stuck right now. Is like, because we have guys that were rehabbing and like, yeah, they have access to our athletic training staff and they have access to all the stuff that we have in the building. But I think there's like an aspect to guys where kind of to come full circle, I guess I didn't plan on doing that, but to come full circle is like there are guys like you were saying might have been injured or different training plans, and now they can tie everything into it and try and do maybe a little bit more mental game, get really, really, really serious about their rehab, try and do some things in the weight room. But I think it's important now, like the situation that we're in is those guys, I always think of it as like those guys can like make or break their career right now. Like exactly what you've been talking about is like you have to kind of figure out maybe what your process is. Is it leading you to results? You have to figure out like is your training leading you to results? Is your mental game stuff leading you to results? And I think just I didn't even plan on trying to get this to go full circle, but I think it kind of does. It all makes sense. It's like all the same. It's kind of all the same topic. Is like you have to do like a deep dive into like what you want to be and what you want your career to be. And I think George, exactly what you were saying about just it's kind of everybody's fault with the training stuff is like everybody wants to just go and like I might have been guilty too if I was a player right now. I just want to go and like hit and video myself and post it somewhere. It's like that's what I want to do. But I think the next level of guys is like the guys that are all right, if I'm hurt right now, I have to go absolutely as hard as I can in my training. I have to go as hard as I can in my PT. Like if I'm a guy that is super negative or I feel like I hit great 5 o'clock BP, and then when it comes down to the games on the line, like Zoe, like you were saying, it's like I'm telling myself, don't strike out, don't strike out, don't strike out. It's like maybe now if we all go and look and kind of go to the drawing board, it's like, what do I need to do? And I think this could be applicable to everybody. It's like being recruited, injury, if you're maybe a negative thinker, whatever it is, if you're a guy that didn't play as much as you wanted to in this first quarter of the year that we were doing in college baseball, right now is a chance to retool yourself. And I think that's just what you guys are saying is awesome. I think it kind of came full circle.
And going into the injury part that I was probably going to get deeper into, but just to touch on it, I think a lot of guys, and I had shoulder surgery, you get into this, you get trapped in this world where there's no actual competition unless you create it for yourself. So you spend 9 months on a throwing program and you spend 9 months doing PT. So what you become worried about is how you feel and how comfortable you are because you're in a rehabilitation process. But then you get to a point where my experience, I remember very clearly, I was on field 6 down at Roger Dean Stadium facing Tyler Green, who was a first rounder. And I remember standing on the mound with no fielders behind me. Like, this isn't competition. Like, I'm just throwing 15 pitches to some dude who broke his hamate. Like, it's not the same, but you have to create it for yourself. And if you can't look at him and say like, okay, I'm going to execute this and I'm going to get him out, which I didn't, unfortunately. But you don't provide that for yourself. It becomes really tough because there's going to be a day where a manager is going to hand you the ball and say, hey, now get people out. And you're like, wait a minute, this isn't field 6 anymore. Like, now I have to go get 3 outs. And it becomes a very different thought process. And if you trap yourself in it and you constantly search for comfort, you constantly search for the ability to be okay. Like, baseball is a game that we often play at under 100%. So you have to find out to use, if you're at 70%, you have to use 100% of that and figure out how to get there competitively and separating that from your training environment.
Yeah, and you just said it. I mean, the difference between being comfortable and being uncomfortable. The first time you compete can't be game 1. You know what I mean? So like, there's got to be a training model that incorporates competition. So it's like all right, so let's just take hitters. They do their training, their progressions, all that. But then there's got to be some days built in, you said it, where they put the velo machine on, or they're hitting difficult breaking balls, or they have to compete with something that's maybe outside of their talent level to get themselves better. Or maybe G or myself is standing on the BP platform, and we're throwing it as hard as we can at them, and we're spinning breaking balls. Like, just making the players, and they have to do this themselves. This comes to truth seeking as well. Like, understand that there needs to be some toughness and some competitive edge in this game, not just, hey, my exit velo is this, my launch angle is this, my blast motion scores are this, which is all important, which all helps. But is that creating the toughness that you need when things are uncomfortable? It's not. So there needs to be that transition or that blending of it to get the best out of the kids, both on defense, pitching, and hitting. Which, again, all comes back to the truth-seeking part of it on what each player needs to realize they need to get better at.
I think that's awesome. I'm going to go to maybe the younger guy who might be playing, travel ball or high school ball. Like, when we talk about being a two-sport athlete, it's not just so you can get bigger, faster, stronger, lifting for football or playing basketball. It's so you get these things. Baseball is a skill-based sport. So the way that we train it, and it's starting to evolve, like we're talking about with challenges, but the way that we train it is we train the skills. It's very hard to replicate on a day-to-day basis what's going to happen in competition. Okay, so if you can only get that X amount of times during this part of the year, when else are you going to get it? And that's what I think gets lost in the two-sport conversation, is that, playing football or playing soccer, playing basketball, you get that competitiveness out of you more. And it's just going to show up because those sports are more or less, they're less skill-based than baseball. So you have to rely on, if you're playing a zone in basketball, you got to rely on, your teammate being where he's supposed to be. In football, you got to cover the gap that you got to cover, whatever it may be, but you're learning how to compete with a team. And like George is saying, when you're on the mound, you got to get 3 outs and get back in the dugout and let the other guys go to work. But when you're out there, you have the other guys to help you out. You got 7 of them behind you, and one of them's behind the dish. They're there to help you. You got to use them. And if you can't compete as a unit, the skill is only going to take you so far, because skill can break down. But if you have that cohesive competitiveness in a unit, it's going to take a lot more to chip away at your armor.
Awesome.
No doubt.
And that's what we got. Anybody need to say anything else or get anything off their chest?
No.
I actually do. I have one thing that Coach Zoe issues challenges.
I said wear it. I want to see you wash your hands.
No, that was awesome, guys. That was really good. It was fun. It was good.
That's great.
So, I think.
Well, TK, actually, I do have this to say. Thank you for putting this together. I know, G, you really wanted to get this going too, and
this is awesome, man.
Times like this, it always ends up being about stimulating your mind and getting yourself to think. And if there's anything like a player can hear from us or me right now is, these are all guys that I see on the road recruiting that I respect a lot. And if you can't sit here for 40 minutes and listen to what gets said and learn, if you can learn nothing, then you're not listening. You're no matter what, we learn from each other constantly. When we're sitting there holding radar guns trying to evaluate you guys, like, this is part of what we do. And we don't have that now. So we have to have the ability to sit and converse with each other and learn and grow, because once you stop growing, you're dying.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you guys coming on. Well, I guess what I started thinking when all this went down and we learned that we weren't going to have sports for a little bit was like, I'm not going to be able to recruit actively like I want to during this time. Okay. So how else can I help or impact the kids that are coming up? And it might not be just for baseball, but it might be for another sport, or somebody who's trying to figure out what school they want to go to. Like, they can learn from us at this time. Like, let's promote what we want to promote when we don't really have time the other 11 months out of the year. Like, we have the time to give information that we want out there, not that's being an agenda driven information from whoever it may be, but we get to tell them what we want to tell them, which I think is what we're doing, which is great.
Yeah.
I liked how we talked about pretty much nothing physically.
Yeah.
It was
when
all.
you said that in text, I was like, that's smart. Like,
yeah,
I don't think many
that's
people are hitting on it.
Right, because these things we're talking about are pretty much 100% true. You talk about mechanics till you're blue in the face. Everybody's right. Everybody's wrong. You know what I mean? This stuff that we're kind of spitting out there it's what happens.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important for, the players out there to understand that they can go 100 different ways to skin a cat with hitting a baseball. But if their mind isn't positive or their mind's not what it needs to be, George, it's going to be tricky. So that's something that everybody needs to work on. Everyone needs to seek the truth. Everyone needs to understand the difference between competing and training. And everybody needs to understand that it takes a culture, within your team to actually win baseball games, which is why we're all out there, is to win baseball games, not to see who can get the most hits. It's to win. So all these things feed into winning baseball games.
Absolutely.